8 coins, 1 submission, 1 grading service, and 2 completely different grading behaviors. The balance scale Onzas, well, they separated all the way across the scale from 63 to mint state 66. The Libertads, well, they clustered, all 5 mint state 67. That distribution is not coincidence. It's not randomness. It's structural behavior. And when you understand grading as structural behavior, not emotional reaction, the results become far more valuable than the individual numbers. Today isn't about whether these grades are good or bad. It's about what this distribution tells us about survivorship at the upper mint state levels in modern Mexican silver. Now, before we walk through the results coin by coin, we need to talk about distribution. Most collectors evaluate grading results 1 coin at a time. But grading behavior reveals itself when you look at groups. When coins spread across multiple tiers, that means the grading scale is recognizing measurable differences in preservation. When coins cluster at a single upper tier, that suggests compression, a structural ceiling where incremental improvements are no longer enough to push the coin grade higher. And ceilings matter, because moving beyond a ceiling requires materially different preservation, not just slightly better preservation. And that's the distinction we're going to see here. Okay, let's start with the 1949 balance scale Onza that came back with a grade of mint state 63. MS63 is a solid mint state coin. The coin is uncirculated. Luster remains intact. There are no problems or impairments pushing it into details territory. But mint state 63 is not about perfection. At this level, we expect exactly what we see: moderate contact in the open fields. We can expect to see some very minor interruptions in frost continuity. When you view this coin, even from within the slab, you can see that the fields are active. There is visible metal movement. Nothing terribly extreme, nothing representing severe damage. But what is there is definitely enough to prevent upward separation. Mint state 63 establishes the lower boundary of this submission. This is the coin that anchors the group. Now we move on to the 1978 Type 2 Onza. This one returned a grade of mint state 64. That single point increase is not cosmetic. Mint state 64 reflects incremental improvement in preservation. Field chatter is visibly reduced. Frost continuity is slightly stronger. Contact mark density is still present, but it's less concentrated. And that's the key. Grading at this level responds to accumulation. It's not about whether a tick exists. It's about how many exist and how concentrated they are in focal areas. Moving from mint state 63 to mint state 64 represents measurable, incremental improvement. The grading scale is functioning normally. Then we reach this 1980/79 overdate. This one came back with a grade of mint state 66. Now we are clearly in upper mint state territory. Mint state 66 requires materially lower contact density than mint state 64. Broad, open areas must remain largely uninterrupted. Frost texture must remain cohesive across all devices. Luster must flow without being broken by clusters of ticks. When you compare this coin to the 1949, the difference is not subtle. It's structural. These surfaces breathe much more cleanly. The eye is not constantly interrupted by minor contact marks. And that is why it's separated. 63, 64, 66. To me, that is textbook distribution. The grading scale recognized real preservation differences across 3 coins. All right, now we transition to the Libertads. The Libertads generally represent modern production, stronger consistency in strike, and improved minting technology. On paper, you might expect similar separation behavior. But that's not what happened. This 1982 graded mint state 67. MS67 is strong mint state. At this level, contact marks are minimal, but not absent. The fields are clean at arm's length, but under magnification, minor ticks accumulate just enough to prevent elite separation. Mint state 67 often represents the structural ceiling when preservation is strong, but not exceptional. It's a high grade, but it's also a threshold. Now, this blast white 1983 Libertad also came back mint state 67. Visually, this coin presents beautifully. Bright luster, clean overall appearance, but grading does not reward brightness. Grading evaluates surface continuity. And structurally, this coin resides in the same preservation band as the 1982 we just looked at. Not weaker, not stronger, same structural tier. Now this rainbow-toned 1983 also returned mint state 67. Now, as you can see, visually, this coin is very different. The toning adds depth. It adds character. In the marketplace, that eye appeal could very well command a substantial premium. But grading does not reward eye appeal. It rewards preservation. Under the color, the structural contact remains. And structurally, it fits within the same preservation tier as the blast white example. Same number, different look. Same structural sealing. Now, let's isolate this 2018. This Libertad also graded mint state 67. This coin represents modern production, improved minting presses, tighter quality control. And yet, even with those modern minting standards, this coin lands at mint state 67. That tells us something very important. The threshold for mint state 68 is not about technology. It's about preservation density. Even modern coins accumulate minor ticks during production and handling. And when those ticks reach a certain accumulation threshold, 67 becomes the structural resting point. Okay, now we've got the 2024 Libertad. Also, mint state 67. Fresh production, modern dies, recent strike, and still clustering at mint state 67. This reinforces the pattern. We are not seeing randomness. We are seeing compression at the upper tier. 5 Libertads, all structurally strong, all preserved at a high level, and all resting at the same mint state 67 ceiling. All right, let's take a step back and look at the distribution. The balance scale Onzas, they separated across the different tiers from 63 to 66. The Libertads, well, they all compressed at mint state 67. That tells us that survivorship above 67 is very thin. Moving from 67 to 68 requires materially lower contact density, not just slightly better surfaces. It requires preservation that is uncommon in practice. And that is the lesson. If you're submitting, understand the ceiling. And if you're buying, understand the difference between eye appeal and structural preservation. Because let's face it, compression at mint state 67 is real. Now let's talk about why moving from mint state 67 to 68 is so difficult. Because this is where a lot of collectors misunderstand the scale. Many assume that 68 is just a slightly nicer 67. That's not how it behaves in practice. At mint state 67, minor ticks are present, but controlled. At mint state 68, contact density must drop materially. Not slightly, not marginally, materially. The open fields must remain largely uninterrupted. Frost must remain cohesive across broader areas. You're no longer evaluating whether this coin is strong. You're evaluating whether this coin is exceptional. And exceptional preservation is not evenly distributed in production. Even modern coins, like the 2018 and the 2024, accumulate microcontact during striking, counting, and handling. Those micro ticks are enough to cap a coin at mint state 67, which is why 5 strong Libertads all clustered at the same grade. Not because they were average, but because they were structurally similar in preservation density. That's compression. And compression is what creates true scarcity at the next tier. The Onzas separated because their preservation tiers were materially different. The Libertads compressed because they were all strong, but none crossed the threshold to exceptional. And this matters in the marketplace, because when collectors see a wall of mint state 67s, they sometimes assume that 68 must be just one step away. But if compression is present, 68 is not one step away. It's preservation rarity, which is why mint state 68 or above examples often command disproportionate premiums. Not because of collector hype, but because distribution behavior supports that scarcity.